Good afternoon, everyone, and happy Mother's Day. I wanted to get on and share a part of a message that I had shared at a women's retreat last September. Part of what we were learning in the women's retreat was sitting at Jesus' feet, and I shared on the story of Mary and Martha, and I'm sure most of you are probably familiar with that. But I thought that part of what I had shared was really appropriate for Mother's Day, and it also includes a story about me and my mom. And so I thought that would be just a good time to share this. So I'm going to go ahead and read the scriptures. The scriptures I'm using are from Luke chapter 10, verses 38 through 42. And I have everything here on my iPad, so if I look down, that's what I'm doing, reading my notes. So the scriptures say, "Now it came to pass as they went, that he entered into a certain village, and a certain woman named Martha received him into her home. And she had a sister called Mary, which also sat at Jesus' feet, and heard his word. But Martha was cumbered about much serving, and came to him and said, Lord, do you not care that my sister has left me to serve alone? Bid her therefore that she help me. And Jesus answered and said unto her, Martha, Martha, you are careful and troubled about many things. But one thing is needful, and Mary has chosen that good part, which shall not be taken away from her." If this story were written in modern day times, it would have been about my mom and I. It would have been Luke chapter 10, the Sandy and Terry story. Now I know that most of you don't know my mom, but I know several of you also do. And you've probably seen pictures of her on Instagram and on Facebook. Her name is Sandy, and she is the woman who raised me, the woman that I learned so much from, the woman who prayed for me, and the woman who now has dementia and doesn't know who my brother or I are. My mom was amazing. She was a tiny ball of energy that never slowed down. She married my very handsome dad. He had features like Elvis and Glenn Campbell. And she was full of ambition, but she was very stubborn. She was the kind of woman that no matter what she tried, she not only succeeded, but she exceeded excessively. She was an incredible cook and baker and a seamstress like no other. She could knit and crochet anything, and her ironing, it was like it came from a dry cleaner's. To me, she was like the Proverbs 31 woman, and not only was her family clothed well, but so were all of my dolls. She helped my dad remodel homes and helped him fix our cars. She painted perfectly. She upholstered furniture. She loved having people over for meals and desserts, and the list goes on. No matter what she tried, she succeeded. And her house was spotless. Spotless. Did I say her house was spotless? One of the things that Mom worked the hardest at was keeping a perfect house. And she, with sighs and stern looks and rules, expected her family to help her keep it that way. She would even miss outings or events because there were dishes or ironing or cleaning to be done. One thing for sure, our home was always immaculate, and no one, except for her mom and her two sisters, could keep house as well as her. So Mom, from the time I was young, Mom, taught me how to do a lot of things, but I didn't dust as good, I didn't vacuum as good, I didn't cook as good, I didn't iron as good, I didn't paint as good, and I definitely could not sew. In fact, the joke in our family is if my husband needs a button replaced on his shirt, he has two options. He can reach out to one of our daughters to sew it on for him, or he can go buy a new shirt. So I'm a bit of a free spirit, so for me, it was just too hard to do things like Mom. It was too much work, too much stress, too much knowing that it wasn't going to be, as good as hers. And it just had too many demands, which is why housework is not one of my top priorities. So don't misunderstand. I'm not a slob, but it's rare occasion that my house is magazine ready. Don't let any pictures that you see on Facebook or Instagram deceive you, because I can certainly pose a picture. I remember one time a friend called and she announced that she and her hubby were going to stop by and was my home in order? To which I replied, my home is never in order, but you can stop by anytime. This is the foundation for the modern day story of Martha and Mary, also called the Sandy and Terry story. I have to wonder what it must have been like in Jesus' time. It must have been incredible to see him perform miracles, teach the crowds, and scold religious leaders. I know that if I was alive then, and I'm the person I am right now, I would have followed him everywhere. I would have abandoned all my previous commitments. I would have avoided as many responsibilities as I could. I would have been watching and waiting for the next miracle, watching to see people's lives change, listening to intently to what he had to say, and I would have loved every minute that he put all the religious leaders in their place. And if I found out that he was coming to my family's home for a meal, I would not have been able to contain myself. And I always think most of us are more comfortable in our own homes. We might be more reserved or proper at church or another, friend's home. But in our own home, we can let down our guard down. Unless we're a Martha or a Sandy. I bet Martha started preparing the minute Jesus told her he was coming over. Rolling dough, cleaning, getting rugs and pillows ready for the guests, and filling water basins so they could wash their feet. That was my mom. If she knew someone was coming over, she would vacuum clean the floors, clean the mirrors, fluff all the rugs, and have food in the works. I believe that Mary probably helped Martha with all the prep work before Jesus got there, just as I used to help my mom. Mary also had to know what it took to put on such a meal, and she would have been keenly aware of her sister's expectations, just as I was always aware of my mom's. But the minute that Jesus arrived, Mary found herself forgetting about everyone else and all the work that still needed to be done, and she seated herself right at Jesus' feet, unaware of the rest of the world, hanging on his every word. So here's the assumption that seems to go with this story, that Mary is irresponsible and lazy, and Martha is an uptight tattletale. Neither one of those is true. We need Marys and Marthas in our world and in our lives. Both have the ability to have an eternal impact on souls. I remember when our twins were just a few months old, I was breastfeeding them both, and Bethany was sick a lot her first years of life. I had a 4-year-old little girl, 2 babies, and a husband who traveled with work most of the time. I was physically and mentally exhausted. I was completely overwhelmed, and my home and my countenance showed it. I dreaded the thought of my family stopping by because my housework was so behind. Well, one day, Mom stopped by in the middle of the afternoon, and I was there alone in the chaotic mess with 2 babies and a 4-year-old. I was mortified. Mom never said a word, but she asked, since she was there, could she help me clean up a bit? With deep embarrassment, I said sure, and the 2 of us started cleaning. And Mom, with her Martha abilities, tore into our home like a cyclone. And by the time she left a couple of hours later, our home looked like the Hilton Hotel. The floors were vacuumed and scrubbed, everything dusted, dishes and laundry done, toilets cleaned, beds made, and toys picked up. It was like a miracle, and I felt so refreshed. After she left, I remember I lit a candle and I just sat in the living room and enjoyed the gift that she gave me that day. My heart was lighter and I felt rested. Years later, we talked about that day, and she told me when I opened the door that my face was ashen, my countenance was defeated, and she knew I needed her help, so she stepped in. She offered no judgment or criticism. She just ministered with the gifts that she had and the way that she knew how. She told me when she left, she could see a difference in my appearance. I wish I could tell her now that she will never know how much that day meant to me and what an impact it had on me, and that I was so thankful for her Martha-like abilities that the Lord had given her and that she used them to bless me. Last summer, my husband and I went to Montana to visit Mom, and I had been feeling very, very sad because dementia and Alzheimer's is a horrible disease. And I had been just really missing her, and my heart had been grieving her. And we got into Missoula pretty late one night, and I thought, well, I'm just going to sneak over to the home and see if she's still awake. And so I remember I opened her door just a little bit, and I tiptoed in, and she was awake. And I sat down next to her, and she sat up next to me, and the emotions just flooded over me, and I started crying, and I said, I've missed you so much. And I have. I missed my mom. And I just was crying and crying, and she was just, sitting there listening to me. I was telling her that I loved her and that I missed her, and she was kind of holding my hand, And we visited for a little bit, and then we prayed, and then I went back to the hotel. Well, the next morning I came back early, and she was awake. And I went into the room, and that same flood of emotions just hit me and overwhelmed me, and I just started crying and crying. And I didn't really mean to, but I just was crying, and I was hugging her, and I was telling her how much I loved her and how much I missed her. And she took me in her arms like a mom takes a baby. And she started rocking me. And she was just whispering, shh, shh, in my ear. And that moment was so special to me because she still had those maternal instincts, those instincts to hug and to love and to comfort. And so the rest of my message that I shared at the women's retreat is to do with the women's retreat. So I'm not going to go into that, but I want to just say, if you're a Martha, use your gifts to bless somebody. If you're a Mary, use your gifts and don't judge one for the other. And on this Mother's Day, spend time with your mom. Give her a phone call if you're far away. Send her a card. call her, do whatever it is that you can, because I truly miss my mom, and I miss all the things that I'll never hear from her again. I won't be able to talk recipes with her. I won't be able to ask her different stories about when she was young and the adventures that her and Dad had. So don't take your mom for granted. And I know there's some that don't have good relationships with their mom, but look in your heart. And if you need to forgive her and make that first move, I would encourage you to do that, because I believe that there can be much healing in that. So I hope you all had a lovely Mother's Day. I hope you all enjoyed my modern version of the Mary and Martha story, and we'll talk to you soon.